Okay, so now we're going to get into actually some really fun part of ecology, which is looking at behavior and interactions between organisms within species or even among species. And this is a branch of ecology called behavioral ecology, which is the study of social relations, especially as they interact between organisms and their environment, with behavior being the mediation. So some sort of resource or some sort of, usually a resource, in which members of a species interact. And of course, the most common one is going to be mating. Sociobiology then is also the branch of biology concerned with these studies of social relations. Some examples might be dominance within a social group. So not all organisms are set up in these social groups, but the ones that are, they may study these sort of things within their groups. And because evolution seems to drive every concept in biology, there is this concept of fitness, or how well an individual can survive and reproduce, and its decisions within a social group will be based on that. Okay, will be based on how well it can preserve its own genes and be perpetuated throughout the next generation. So fundamental to this question of social dynamics is, what is a male and a female? So many of the dynamics between species or between individuals within the species are based on whether things are male or female. So generally, the definition of a female is the sex that produces the larger, more energetically costly gametes. Okay? And therefore its reproduction is limited by the amount of resources it can attain. Males produce the smaller, less energetically cost gametes, so its reproduction is limited by its ability to fertilize, so its access to mates. A lot of species, however, are hermaphrodites, meaning they have both male and female parts. And best example of that is plants, which have both a large ovule reproductive structure, which can accept the smaller pollen, which contains the sperm. Okay, so it has both parts. It can produce pollen and it can produce the ovule, which can be fertilized by the sperm within a pollen grain. Not all plants are like this, but a lot of flowering plants are. So there are two different ways then that sexual selection is driven in a population. Sexual selection then is differences in reproductive rates among individuals as a result of differences in mating success. So the selection occurs through the reproduction. Now this can occur through intrasexual selection, where individuals of one sex compete among themselves for access to mates. An example of that is the elephant seal we have here. So males will compete for a harem of females in which they are able to mate with. And then there's intersexual selection, where individuals of one sex choose the mates of the opposite sex based on some trait. An example of this might be in house finches. The females will choose the male that has the brightest and best coloration. Alright, so given a choice, female guppies will mate with brightly colored males. Okay, so here you have sexual selection occurring where you have choice. Okay, so that would be intersexual selection. Female choice. Brightly colored males also, however, attract predators. So this can be problematic. If you're too brightly colored, then you will get eaten. If you aren't brightly colored enough, then you won't mate. So there's a trade-off there. Color changes show a mating advantage, including the brightness, number of spots, and the total pigmented area. So this male here, he's very bright. He's got lots of pigment. He's got spots, and so that would be probably a good choice for this female. So Inler did a a few experiments both in the lab and in nature to test for whether selection was occurring and whether this trade-off was occurring between predators and sexual selection. So when males were freed from predation in low or no predation areas, then you would get an increase in the color in male guppies. But in in areas that have large predators or a large concentration of predators, you would get a decrease in color. So females would not be as choosy because they couldn't be. So the same thing was done with natural experimental streams. So they introduced guppies that had a high predation rate, and they put them in different areas. One area had lots of predators. One area had colorful guppies with no or very few predators, and one didn't have any guppies at all. And after 15 generations, they sampled again, and the area that did not have predators were colorful. They were also colorful in low predation, but in the high predation, they remained less colorful. Okay, so they were taken from high predation areas which had therefore little coloring, and you could see that they changed based on the selection of the females. Okay, a similar thing has been shown in adult scorpion flies from the genus Panorpa, and they feed on dead arthropods in the forest understory, like crickets. But those are often limited because of how far they are buried. So what Thornhill did, the researcher, is he found that male Panorpas will take possession and guard dead arthropods to attract females, and they will especially guard the larger ones. Okay, so he found this experimentally by putting in these prey and then putting in more scorpion flies than there were of these dead arthropods, and he found that the bigger ones were able to defend these areas from other males. But when he took those males out, those ones that were not associated with a cricket then took over the cricket. Okay, and what it found in nature was that the larger the male, the larger the prey, the more attractive it was to females. So again, you have intersexual selection occurring because the females are choosing the males based on some trait, their ability to get large arthropods. Now, in plants, it's a little harder to show, but there was a study done where they looked at wild radish flowers. They have both stamens and pistils, but they cannot self-fertilize, so they have self-incompatibility. That way they can ensure then that they are reproducing sexually. So Marshall, what he did was he found a non-random mating in wild radish populations based on the pollen. So he was able to trace pollen to specific plants and found that they preferred one pollen type over another. I didn't really say why, but he did. Maybe there was competition among pollen. Maybe the pollen was able to disperse better, or maybe the abundance of pollen was more in one plant than another. But for whatever reason, there were some plants that were better able to fertilize other plants than other pollen plants, than other plants were. Anyway. All right, so sociality is a very interesting and very interesting phenomenon that occurs among mostly animals, and something that captures a lot of attention in the animals that we kind of know and love. So it's kind of popular to talk about these social animals. And humans are very social animals as well. So the evolution of sociality is usually accompanied by three things. Cooperative feeding, so the ability of a group to gather food together. The defense of the social group, in numbers, they are able to ward off predators or ward off other members of the same species which might pose a threat, and restricted reproductive opportunities. Okay, so usually only a pair or one female or a couple males are able to reproduce, and all the rest cannot. So this generally involves exchanges of resources or other forms of assistance. So you may have some that are defenders, some that are food gatherers, and others that are reproducers. So eusociality is a more complex level of sociality, which has the other characteristics. Individuals from more than one generation are living together, so you have grandparents mixed with aunts and uncles, and so on and so forth. You have cooperative care of young, so not just the mother is in charge, but they keep track of the young as a group. And then they have a division of individuals into non-reproductive and reproductive castes, or basically levels. So there's an alpha male and an alpha female, which are the top reproductive class, and then maybe lower classes can reproduce, but not as much as the top, and so on and so forth. And it may not be that way, maybe separate a different way. But some examples include bees, ants, meerkats, herding animals, lions, chimpanzees, lots of monkeys. They will create these very complex social dynamics within their populations. So cooperative breeding then is a species that lives in groups that cooperate in their rearing of offspring. The question, though, is what benefit do helpers gain? If you're not reproducing, why are you helping out? And inclusive fitness may be one of those reasons, which is, even though you're not the mother and father of all these children, you may be related in some way, and so your genes are being represented in these generations through relatedness. So improving the survival and reproductive rates of those family members which have some of the same genes, helping out is how you can perpetuate those genes. And you may have an inherited territory, which may increase the helper's probability of future reproduction and recruiting events. So it may help and become part of the group when it's not reproducing, and in the future may become kind of those reproductive individuals may die or move or be replaced in some way by other helpers that were not reproductive and now are. Or kin selection, helping of related individuals. So cousins, uncles, aunts, and so forth will help the rearing of children because, again, that inclusive fitness. So a good example, and some research that has done on this, has been done on green woodhoopoes, and some research which has been done on them studied these flocks of groups of 2 to 16. So they live in small groups, not extensively large, and only one pair of them breed, so one male and one female. And they exhibit strong philopatry, which means they don't disperse very far, the young, when they grow up and mature. They usually stay close to home. But within their habitat, there's a scarcity of good, high-quality roost cavities. High-quality roost cavities are ones that will be protected from predators. So the bulk of the young tend to be helpers, ranging from full to half siblings, because they don't go very far, so all the ones around that area are generally related. Full siblings share on average of 50% of genes from their mother and father through sexual reproduction. They're obviously not exactly the same unless they're twins. So why are they staying and helping? Well, staying and helping, defending, increase their inclusive fitness. So again, by helping out their kin, they are helping preserve their own genes, and also by having, most of them had delayed reproduction. They found that those that waited longer or reproduced later in their years were able to defend their territories better, and later on in life they were able to replace the breeding pair and become the breeding pair. And so they increase their overall fitness after having been there for a while and increasing their inclusive fitness. All right, so one more good example are African lions. And Packer and Pusey studied the cooperation among African lions in the Serengeti, which have prides of female lions, so mostly a social group of females, but it does include some male lions as well. So a pride can be as small as 3 to 6 females, but as many as 18. They cooperate in hunting, defense, rearing of young, so there's lots of things they cooperate in. And they do this because a lot of them are related. So there's kin selection, but also a lot of them, of the females at least, are able to reproduce with the males of the pride. Now the males, however, there are usually only 1 or 2, maybe a few more to a pride. And so they will cooperate in territory defense. So they will often form these coalitions, but they aren't always made up of close relatives. So the question remains, well, why would you create a coalition with a male that you are not related to? Well, the reason why they might do this is because single males have almost no chance of claiming and defending a pride. They can easily be bumped out by another larger group of males. So out of necessity, they will form these coalitions. But the size of their coalitions usually depends on how related they are. Coalitions of 2 or 3 that take over a pride have even reproductive success among their pride of female lions. So you have 2 males, they form a coalition, they're not related, but they go in and they take over a pride of females, and they share about 50% of the mating among their females. So the reason why they form a coalition is so that they can increase their overall fitness, increase their ability to reproduce. So if there's a coalition of 2 or 3, they're likely to be unrelated because of their overall fitness. But a larger coalition of 3 to 9, what they found is usually the only 2 of them will reproduce after they take over a pride of females. So if they are unrelated, it wouldn't make sense for you to form a coalition of 3 or 4 or 5 of unrelated males. If you're the 3rd, 4th, or 5th, you're not going to get to reproduce, and none of the females are related to you, or the males. So there's no included or overall fitness. So in a larger coalition, these are likely to be related, so that even though they don't reproduce, the top 2 are the only ones reproducing, they still have inclusive fitness because they're related to the other males that are reproducing. Pretty cool stuff. All right, that's it for social behavior.